work session to order of the mayor and council for the city of Snellville for Monday, February 10th, 2020. So first we'll go through the regular business meeting agenda. I need somebody for the invocation. Does anyone want to?
Not me.
Not it.
I nominate Dave.
Yes, I second that. It'll be quick.
Anyone?
Seriously? Tony.
Yes.
Tony?
He always does a magnificent job of it.
And then someone for the pledge?
I'll do it.
Excellent.
See.
Do you not do it already today?
No, I'm gonna do it again.
She got it memorized this time.
Oh, good.
Oh,
That's a relief.
oh, we're gonna let you do the invocation next time.
I pledge allegiance.
Yeah, sure.
So we have,
That'd be the indication.
we have the minutes to approve, department reports, we've got planning commission, CID, Downtown Development Authority, and the DAS and URA.
Mayor, I have not heard if Brandon Abbey is going to work with the URA DAS. Don said he would be back. Here it goes. Oh, there it is,
And
yep.
Bill's
He
here.
looks like he's
I won't speak for him then, but I don't know if Brandon will be here.
Okay, I'll look for him. If he's not here, we'll pass over. We have the approval of the agenda. I've got a.
All one item?
Yep.
Well, I've got a
two.
note on here, if anyone wants to talk about this, to amend the agenda, to add under new business, a second reading for ordinance 2020-05, for ordinance, the adoption of the amended and restated defined benefits retirement plan ordinance. I guess, did y'all do a first reading at the last meeting?
Yes,
That was
we
my
did.
error. I forgot to carry it over to this agenda for a second. And I believe Chuck and Tony said it was okay to amend the agenda to add it tonight.
Okay.
And it was that's what it was said in the first one, it was gonna be on the agenda. It'd almost be misleading if I didn't put it on there tonight.
Well, I think it's just Emmett and two other people, right?
It's an old plan that's, just has a few members.
Okay, does anybody need the wording for that? Or what
Are
you're
you gonna do it, Christie?
Benefits on.
It's ordinance, second reading, ordinance 2020-05,
2020-05.
ordinance for adoption of the amended and restated defined benefits,
Ordinance for the adoption of.
the amended. Slow note taker. And restated defined benefits,
Defined benefits.
retirement plan ordinance.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me.
And adoption agreement.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That'll be enough.
Restated defined benefits retirement plan,
Yes.
Ordinance, ordinance.
Yes.
Ordinance
Yep, and
adoption agreement. Ordinance adoption agreement.
Ordinance and.
And
Ordinance
and
adoption agreement. Ordinance
Now, you see why I didn't raise my hand?
and adoption agreement. Thank
That's
you
it.
for that.
Okay, we have nothing on the public hearing. Under new business, we have the resolution for extending the moratorium on the scooters.
Need a cough drop? I have a cough drop.
Kurt just gave me one, I think he's choking on it now.
I'm sorry.
Which, we can come back to that one because that's on our work session agenda to discuss that.
Okay.
Mine's a refill up.
And then we have just asked for confirmation of Ann Seacrest to the Planning Commission.
We didn't get her application in the packet, did we?
Yeah, we did.
We did? I didn't see
Pages
it.
13 through 16.
All right, well, maybe I didn't scroll down that far. Sorry, Ian.
'Cause you usually-
And then that's it for the meeting, unless anybody has
There
any
she is.
questions.
You wanna look at it?
She's
Oh, you
right
found
here.
it?
Yeah.
Okay, any correspondence?
No,
Are
ma'am.
you fit to talk? City attorney's
I have
report?
one city report, the city attorney report. It's a house at 1802 Driftwood Place. I've got the quality of life enforcement guy's file. It's got a number of problems. Trash.
Ooh.
They've started cleaning up the trash. There's a dumpster that was delivered today, so that part's getting cleaned up, but there are broken windows and broken doors. And the request is that this be declared a nuisance. It would be an add to the agenda, depending on the pace y'all wanna go. It can certainly wait. But there's some others that show broken doors, and we just didn't wanna let the time pass, where y'all would have an expectation for this to be cleared up, if you wanted to move a little faster.
So is the property owner working on it now?
The property
or was-
owner, that's why the nuisance action is, they would use quality of life, but the actual owner is already in jail. And so you've got some people who are living there who have a connection to the owner, but not good things happening in the house at this point, so. And not an expectation that the owner was gonna be doing anything.
Not if he's in jail.
No.
Well, even before then, that's how it got like that.
Yeah. So just up to you guys.
So we need to add that to the agenda.
You'd have to declare it a nuisance, add it to the agenda and declare 1802 Driftwood Place as a nuisance action if you want us to move forward on an expedited basis.
Solange, do you understand all of the dynamics of this part? Do you want to go through that? further?
Yeah, there are two ways that quality of life enforcement, one is a criminal where they just go to magistrate court and get cited and there's a fine. With a nuisance action, there's a code that the state actually approved where the city can actually go in and make the repairs, clean up, cut the grass, tear down the landscaping, or tear down the whole house if it's justified, based on a nuisance complaint that goes to municipal court, but we actually use our resources and then create a lien against the property. This property has no mortgage, I believe it doesn't have a mortgage on it. We will check title when we're doing the nuisance action, but that gives us a first priority position on the property, so we will get paid in this situation, when it's sold or when we force it to be sold.
So what's your choice?
Do it.
Let's move
Yeah,
it.
let's go.
All right,
Add
so
it
we'll
tonight.
add this as new business item D.
You wanna take that one too, so you can just roll with it?
I'll roll with it.
No sense doing it twice, with two different people.
I got that in its folder.
Tony, it shows a mortgage balance in 2013 of $125,300. May have paid off in the last 5 years, but
Right. We'll look for it.
because there's been no real transfer of title since then. Well, wife to a husband, no?
Is there,
Dad died, yeah.
is there any specific wording for a motion on that?
Just to declare 1802 Driftwood Place a nuisance. Allow the city attorney to move forward on filing an action. At 125, Todd, I think we'd still be safe.
Oh, yeah. I'm a go. I don't want to make the motion.
Okay, we have discussion items. Item A, concepts for the Grove and Promenade at the Grove at Town Center by Root Design. So we have Michael Kidd here.
Michael, y'all know Michael.
What did you call him?
Michael helped us out on the green, the redesign and the improvement of the green. He's the principal and owner of Root Design Studio, a great landscape architect. And you guys approved a contract with him a couple months ago for him to go to work and kind of be our expert in the area of design on the town center. And that starts from City Hall all the way through the 10-acre area. And so he came, I guess, a couple weeks ago and met with Eric and I and gave us some ideas of what they were working on, and really neat stuff. And we suggested that he come and bring it to you guys to get your input. So, Michael, I'll turn it over to you.
All right,
Butch,
thanks,
may I
Butch.
just add a tidbit to that, just for clarity? Our developer is gonna be developing most of the green and the landscape inside that 12 acres is what we have termed in our development agreement as kind of a generic or base level. So Michael's role is to do everything else that's vertical and give us the excitement and the experiences and all of those kinds of things. The developer's gonna do the walks and the generic stuff that would be flat. All right, Michael, not to steal your thunder,
No,
but
no,
just so you
that's-
define your role a little bit too.
Yeah, that's good context. Thank you all for entertaining me tonight. Let's see here. So this is really the full scope of the promenade, and I think are we calling this the Grove Walk?
Grove Walk.
The Grove Walk. So this goes all the way from City Hall, past the police department, and into the new Grove development. So this is kind of the whole sweep of what that promenade area would look like. And what we're trying to do is activate that space, so it's not just a connection from point A to point B, but there are little experiences along the way with public art and seating areas and little activities for kids and visitors. We've looked at some digital kiosk displays that we might have in some of these areas, and just some looking at different fun things that we can do along that stretch to keep people engaged and kind of weave all this together, so it's not just the Grove development and City Hall and Town Green. We're trying to really connect all those spaces through the walkways and the streetscapes as we go.
And the greenway that'll come in from the back.
Yes, and the greenway as well, which we'll see, that'll connect up top here. So if we zoom in on this area a little bit, this is the connection from City Hall all the way over to where the police department is, to Clower Street, which is where this connection piece would tie in with the actual Grove development that the developer is working on. So we looked at how to, starting from City Hall, first of all, the big challenge is how do we get through that parking lot? And how do we make that, kind of a fun experience? So we're starting by looking at this little landscape island that's there now, and I'll show you a photo of the existing, and we'll talk about what this proposed is. But connecting that with some painted crosswalks here, an 8-foot sidewalk connection that would transition to a 10-foot walk here, a little seating area and some pavement areas, and another seating area further down. If we look at that first area, we talked about connecting that crosswalk straight across the parking lot. In order to do that, we'll just look at this photo. This is the existing condition through the parking lot. So in order to, it's set up right now, it wants to connect straight through, but there's a tree right in the middle. So in order to make this happen, we would probably need to capture these 2 parking spaces here to widen that center island so that the trail can go straight through, and you'd have landscape buffer on either side. And then that would connect all the way to the island on the back side of the parking lot. Nice wide 8-foot crosswalks. We've talked about some sort of crosswalk art program for some of these crosswalks. Those would be more than just painted white stripes on the ground. So that would start that whole procession all the way through to the Grove development. And then in the center area here, we've looked at our first vertical architectural element. And we're playing around with some different ideas, but we're wanting to, there are going to be several of these vertical structures along the way, all the way into the grove. And we're wanting those pieces to not just be an arbor or, seating area, but for the structure itself to become part of the public art of the space. So we're looking at some funky, different ideas of what that first arbor might be in that little landscape island. And this would probably just be a pass-through space, but it would sort of set the tone as you make your way over to the grove. So these are some different concepts just in elevation. These would look very different in 3D. Some concept images that we've looked at for some things that are comparable. We're showing here. This center one is that is a seating area with essentially an arbor above it, but that arbor is a sculptural piece of artwork. It's an interpretive. These are giant leaves of some abstract plant on the ground to create that arbor. Same thing with this. We're looking at very organic shapes and forms to kind of play off the idea that the development is called the grove, and that comes from saving several of the large specimen trees in the middle of that green space. So we're really using that idea of the grove and the trees as sort of a centerpiece and kind of a guiding idea for the design. We're looking at these little kind of modern take on that idea, but using these very organic, natural forms with those architectural pieces. As we get in between the parking lot and where the police department is, we have the parking lot of the police department here. And currently the parking lot there's another bay of parking down here in this area. In order to make that connection really work, we would most likely have to remove that section of parking if that's feasible. And capture more of that space for this promenade. That allows us to pick up the 10-foot wide walkway from here and capture a nice 10-foot landscape strip that's between the walkway and the street to give it a more comfortable feel as you go through there. The construction challenge here is that if we do this corner is significantly higher than the sidewalk down here, so you would need a pretty good sized retaining wall there. You can see from this existing condition. So this fence right here would get pulled back, and we'd have to cut into that slope with a retaining wall. The idea, though, would be to get, right now, the connection comes out from the City Hall parking lot. There's sort of an odd connection over to this ramp, and then back over and back to the sidewalk and up, and then back again over to the police department area. It's a very convoluted path. So the idea is just to go literally straight through here. We'd have to look at possibly relocating that tree and some of these other street trees, but to pull that slope back, if we can lose that row of parking. And then in cross section, this is what that would look like. This is looking back down the other way with the road over here, the parking lot over there. So this is that cut that we would have to make, and that's about an 8 to 10 foot tall retaining wall. Now that would slope down to, as you go up the wall slopes down to meet grade. So it would be 8 to 10 feet tall at its highest point around that corner. But again, that gives you a nice wide 10-foot walkway with landscape strip on either side to kind of give you an idea of what that's probably the most challenging area from a construction standpoint. So we just wanted to show what that might entail. All right. This area, right, this is that same area. Looking at specialty paving, these purple areas that I had along the promenade, that was just a graphic technique to kind of tie all those different specialty paving areas together. That's not intended to mean that those are going to be purple circles on the ground. What we're looking at there are different types of pavers and concrete textures, patterns, joint patterns to create these areas that are different from just a regular concrete sidewalk. To give some interest at the ground plane and create areas for different activities to happen. So where you have something like this, part of this may become a seat wall. One of these circles may become a raised landscape planter with a seat wall around it with a tree in the middle of it. Or it could just be literally different patterns on the ground itself. And these are some examples of some of the aesthetics that we're looking at for that. Again, some other examples from some other parks with more color involved. But we're really trying to activate that space, not just on the ground plane, but starting to look at how even the paving patterns start to come up from the ground. If you look at this in plan view, that's an interesting form. But if you look at it in 3D, these little green dots become little domes that kids can climb on and play on. And then this band here is raised up in spots to become a seat wall. And that starts to capture the landscape as well and the circulation, so that all that kind of integrates together as one piece. And that's really what we're after, what we're trying to do that whole way along the promenade. All right, the area behind the police department. So this is the first kind of significant seating area that we would have along the way before you get to the Grove. This is the existing fence behind the police department with the little garden area back there. We're looking at doing some enhanced landscaping behind that as sort of a buffer between the two. And then this first seating area here. So that would be just coming across that crosswalk. There'd be a space out here where that seating area would be. And then enhancing that landscape back here behind the fence to kind of screen that area back there and create a little buffer between the trail and the police department. Some other conceptual sketches of that seating arbor. So again, we're playing around with those different forms so that the arbor itself can potentially start to become part of that public art system. But this one would incorporate some seating as well. That area would potentially have a location for an actual sculptural art installation, and then potentially a little play area for kids in that spot as well. And then moving down to the intersection, just before you enter the Grove, again, we've got that 10-foot walkway and then another area of that paving, and that star indicates that digital kiosk that we mentioned. I don't know, have you guys talked to them at all much about the kiosks? So
Some of them went
Some
on
of
the
us
tour,
toured,
some
yeah.
of them didn't.
So for those of you that didn't go on that tour, we're looking at these sort of interactive digital displays at key spots in and around that development for a number of different uses. One would simply be navigation with maps. One would be advertisement of city events. One could be advertisement of private things going on with the private development side of things. But having these displays, this is about the size and scale of what those would look like. And the intent is that they would be interactive, and that we may end up with some kind of games associated with those and different activities and things that you might be able to do as another way to engage the public as they enter these spaces. All right, so that was back here, and then as you cross Flower Street, you enter the new development for the Grove. And the first area that we would enter along the promenade is this area that we're looking at as a food truck court in support of the activities that would be going on at the Grove itself. This isn't exclusively a food truck court, and actually my guess is that the food trucks would probably only be there a few times during the year. This is also intended to be sort of a garden kind of courtyard area as you enter into that space to really start to set the tone of the Grove green space. So the different components here, we wanted to actually capture the adjacent parking spaces as part of this courtyard experience. And this is where the food trucks potentially would park when they're there for different events. And then you'd have access in between to this center piece here with some seat walls and benches and enhanced landscaping to kind of create that garden feel. And then in that center spot there, that might be a fountain, that might be another piece of public art, that might be some other garden feature in that spot. But again, providing some activity and things to do along the way just before you enter into the grove, which is this connection here. That brings you, well, I wanted to talk a little bit about the site furnishings as we look at that food truck area. We're looking at different types of seat walls and integrated bench seating, as well as some freestanding furniture, modern types of furnishings. Right now I'm thinking that the furnishings along the promenade and in the grove itself would be unique to the development. And those would be, in my mind right now, very bright and kind of whimsical, colorful, playful furnishings that would be very different and interesting from the rest of the development. The rest of the development is most likely going to be more contemporary, more subdued than that, typical park benches and picnic tables. But I think that promenade and the grove area, along with these arbors and public art and all those things, I think the furnishings need to take on that same quality as you go through that space. So moving into the grove area, the promenade comes through here. This is the new market building, the library, and then the parking deck is off that way. So again, this is probably the largest concentration of that specialty paving area. There's a big vehicular intersection that we have to get across here. So we're trying to make that still a pedestrian space as well as accessible to vehicles. Spaces, like I said, for raised planters, public art, and then this is the tree save area that I mentioned in the middle of the grove. So those would be the existing trees there that we're preserving, and that all these circular paving patterns were a play off of the tree save area for those trees in the grove, again, to kind of tie all that together. Off to the north end of that tree save area, we've got an outdoor reading room for the library. We've got a little valet kiosk, and this would be at the terminus coming from City Hall, but at the beginning point, if you're starting at this area. And the idea is that some people that are visiting would pull in here. There might be a valet kiosk, drop off your car, the car gets parked in the deck, and that's where you would pick your car up after you go eat dinner, watch a concert, whatever it may be. So that kind of completes the progression of the promenade. I want to look quickly at a few of the surrounding entry points and show how we're trying to integrate those as well. So we'll look at this area here as a connection off of Oak Road, which has been talked about as a pretty major point of entry on into the future for this development. As well as up here on Wisteria, we've got a bus drop-off and the connection of the Greenway. So just a quick sketch of that area off Oak Road. These are most likely going to end up being a couple of restaurants, from what I understand with the development, that kind of frame the main entrance off of Oak Road into that space. And we're looking at, again, playing off those paving patterns and incorporating potentially a digital kiosk in this location as an entry point. But to try and create something fun and interesting just in the paving as you enter from Oak Road into that space. On the other side, on Wisteria, we're looking at a bus drop-off currently in the site plan from the developer, it's shown here, and we're talking to them about relocating that over to here, so that as kids are dropped off, they would come straight through that plaza and into the entry to the library. There's only one entrance to the library, which is down in this area, so that we want to make that as direct of a connection as we can. The developers, designer are looking at these spaces between the library and the market and the parking deck. But we're coordinating very closely with them on all the design of those spaces as well. And then we'll take a closer look at the connection of the greenway and how that, there's been discussion about whether it should come straight across here or whether it should come down a bit before it comes over. So we're still looking at those different scenarios. And then wherever that crosses, right now I think that this is probably the best crossing for the greenway itself. And that sets up a natural gateway entrance into this space between the library and the market. So we're still working through all those smaller areas. Okay, now we're going to look at just quickly, we'll look at the Grove green space area itself. And I'm going to look at this in a few different zones. We're going to look at this area here first, which is labeled as a grade change. There's about a 4 to 6 foot elevation change between Oak Road and the elevation of the tree save area. So one of the big construction issues was how do we deal with that grade change? How do we make that an integral part of the space? And the way that we're looking at doing that, this is a 3D model looking back towards Oak Road of how we might do that. This is illustrated as a 6 foot grade change here with some amphitheater style steps that would lead straight down into the space. And then coming off the side of those steps, you'd have seat walls that would be 18-inch seat wall height, spinning off into these little side areas that create opportunities for some other fun activities. This is a more developed sketch that we're looking at, trying to really integrate that amphitheater seating into the space, and looking at some examples of areas where you've got a grade change that's similar scale to what we're talking about here. This is not a huge space. It's not a really tall grade change, but there's some interesting things that you can start to do with landscape planters and some ornamental trees, as well as seating plazas with these circular areas where you can start to incorporate some umbrellas and outdoor seating. And all of this sets up nicely to be the primary seating spot for an event that would happen. This circle right here is the location for the band shell for concerts and performances and events. So all of that becomes prime seating for events that would take place there. In this corner, we're looking at the idea of incorporating a fountain as a garden element, but also at the bottom of that space, looking at an interactive fountain feature as well. A lot of that's going to be dependent on the budget, but right now, a fountain element like that would add a huge level of ambiance to that whole garden space. And with the interactive element at the bottom, that gives something more to attract younger kids and families to the space. On the flip side of that, on the other side, we're looking at these plaza areas and what we might do here. Some of that may be outdoor seating. Some of that might be a space for an outdoor piano. Some more of the public art or some play elements. Okay, now we're going to look at this area up here. We talked about the valet kiosk and outdoor reading room in 3 dimension, what that potentially looks like looking from the library back towards the restaurant buildings. You've got your valet kiosk here, and we haven't had time to really develop anything in terms of the form of that yet, but that would be along the same lines of these other arbors and vertical structures that we're looking at. Same thing here with the outdoor reading room. Right now in this sketch, it's shown as shade sails, but that would most likely be some sort of arbor structure as well. different platforms here at different levels. These are 6-inch grade changes here, so you've got 1 step up, 2 steps up to this level. With some railings, some seating, that becomes outdoor reading space for the library. And then that grove area here where the tree save is intended to be more of a natural area, but it's intended to invite people in and underneath those trees. That's going to be one of the more pleasant spaces, especially during the warmer months. And we're looking at that as a potential area for incorporating a sculptural bench to honor Mr. Snell and Sawyer on the bench itself as part of the public art program. That we'll have to work with everybody on what the best location for that would be. But right now, I think that tree save area is probably the most significant location. And then finally, we'll look at the band shell itself. This is, in my estimation, going to become the centerpiece, kind of the anchor for this whole development. And I really think it needs to be some sort of iconic architectural element as well. And when I started to sit down and kind of sketch ideas for the band shell, I was thinking about just some big architectural feature, played around with some different forms and shapes and wasn't really sure what that was going to ultimately look like. I got distracted somewhere along the way, the phone rang or something, and was staring at this picture that hangs in my office. This is a live oak tree from the house where I grew up in Louisiana. So I spent most of my childhood in this tree, and we had all kinds of parties and events. We had some weddings out here, some family reunions, different parties. The tree itself creates a canopy, creates that space for those outdoor events. And with the name of this development being the Grove and the whole kind of centerpiece being that tree save area, it just started to make sense to me to think about what that band shell might become if we started to think about it in this way, and how this tree creates that space. We looked at some different forms, organic forms of different band shells and what that might look like. Thinking about a band shell as a sculptural element as well. And back to pen and paper, thinking about the tree and how that might take 3D form. And I realized I wasn't going to be able to do this on paper, that I was just going to have to actually try to build a model of this thing, which is what I did. So this is a model of what was in my head for this band shell. And I've got the physical model here that I'll pull out in a minute, but just to give everybody the sense of what this would be. This upper circle here is a 30-foot diameter circle platform for the stage. You'd have a couple steps coming up from the Grove area into the stage component. There would be an accessible ramp that would wrap around the backside. And then the structure itself would be some sort of structural steel components that would form the main branches of the tree. And then you would have smaller pieces that would come off to form the secondary and tertiary branch patterns. But that shell would be on the back half of the tree. And then this space out in front would be the primary space for bands that would be performing a concert. The roof itself would most likely come out and come over the front of this a little bit. We still have to work out a lot of these details, but in concept, this is what we're looking at. And then how do we clad that structure with an actual skin to create a shell so it's not so see-through and transparent, but to create an actual band shell around that tree structure to give it a little more weight. And then thinking about what that might look like at night, if you can incorporate LED lighting in these structural steel components to light up the skin of that band shell, so that that whole thing becomes, again, a kind of a sculptural element itself, which could be an interesting component, I think, equally when there is a concert and when there's not a concert. So if there's nothing going on here, it's not just a dark shell that somebody's waiting for a concert. This could be a interactive element that kids would play in and have a ball in, just like I did in that live oak tree. And I've got the actual model here. If we just to maybe have a little more drama with this thing, it's tiny, but if we can,
It
can
looks
we?
bigger in the picture.
Yeah, that was the intent. But can we put the lights on? So just to kind of give you an idea of what that starts to look like if these lights don't die on.
It gives it a better effect when you do that anyway.
Well, and there's all sorts of things that you could do with the lighting.
Change continually.
Right, that could be synchronized to music, that could be different colors, it could come on and off.
Almost look like lightning bugs.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of different ways that we could activate that, but I think that, like I said, that would really become the central iconic piece, and I think that would start to gain a lot of recognition for the space for Snellville. People would start to this would be all over Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all those other things. So anyway, that kind of sums up the presentation. So I will just end with this.
Very creative.
And the little guy could be our public art.
Right.
As long as he's removable for concerts. Mike Sand.
So I don't know if anybody has any questions, if we have time for any questions. But
We've got just a couple of minutes because we still have a few things to go over.
I think you did a great job.
I like it a lot.
Very impressive.
What do you think the actual material would be? Kind of a canvas or a...
I'm not sure exactly what the skin of that band shell would be yet. We're gonna have to. Part of this with these structures, the way that this is kind of evolving,
Polyester.
I think we're really going to need to engage
Of course, you'd say that.
a couple different types of people. One would be an actual sculptor, and one would be a structural engineer, to kind of get everybody's heads together. Because this is, you know, when I started looking for precedent images, it was clear very quickly that there are no precedent images for something like this. This is going to be a truly unique structure. So we'll need to do a little research on the type of cladding that we could use for that. And that's going to evolve as we go.
Sure.
Do we want it to be translucent? Do we want it to be more of a hard shell? So we'll continue to play around with those ideas, but that's a very good question.
But what Michael just said, though, about there being no other examples,
that, yeah.
that's
I like
what you
that.
guys have
I
wanted
like
from the
that.
beginning.
Oh, yeah.
We want to be unique.
Something different. You know, we haven't talked budget yet.
Yeah, of course.
We gotta have the dream before we see
Well, we
it.
didn't need a city manager anyway, we can afford it.
Awesome.
Anything else? Great. All right. Well, thank y'all again for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll keep working. So I'm just gonna copy this.
Very good.
Yeah, that's neat.
I like the idea of, for the band shell, a see-through acrylic or something like that. Where you can, I think
Well,
that
and
would be
you
really.
could do see-through at the bottom and
Give us some definition at the
up
top.
at the top you want it,
Yeah.
not see through the block.
No, leave that
I
one
just
plugged
think
in
it'd
until
be
the
nice
projector
to
goes.
Do that.
have it be kind of translucent.
Okay, so, but you wanna do your
Yeah,
Sure.
projects?
yeah.
You've got a new list in front of you. I tried to add everything that we discussed at the retreat. For instance, town center. I kind of combined everything, finance, design, and public art. And the public art was part of the reactivation of a recommendatory arts commission. We did have a productive meeting with the county. I feel like the county will start working on the construction IGA based on, they've got a template from Lilburn. It has to change pretty substantially, but something to work on. We have our first call with the county, and I think it'll probably be weekly. Regular calls with the county, so we keep them up to date on everything.
And that may be an actual meeting that we talk about the cost estimates.
Yeah, one or the other. We're gonna keep them updated. A lot of things in the human resources area. The job descriptions talked a little bit about downtown director, assistant city manager, and salaries will come in the budget discussion. But I'll have those job descriptions for you at the end of this week. I went to several good sources, and we'll come up with a good director's job description and work with the DDA on that also. The city 2020 census was an emphasis. Solange, I know you had a meeting last Friday with Jason and Brian. And Solange is going to be our spearhead in the public area. And I think you kind of brought up to date a little bit on the county's activities and how we're fitting in. So the beginning plan is in place. And of course, I mean, there's not a lot of time. I mean, the counting starts in March.
Yeah.
And so working with Brian, I think we'll get the word out there and just be as visible as possible to make sure we count everybody. The UDO, there's not much I can add to the meeting the other night. We're going to, Caleb will add all the comments. We'll come up with the final draft and set up a public meeting, planning commission review, and then mayor and council adoption. The Snellville Days discussion, I think Dave joined in a meeting with JRM the other day where we talked about some potential changes this year to improve what we have. But everybody, I think, is in agreement. The discussion for future events needs to start taking place in May of this year. So we work on the direction we're headed. Everybody wants to improve the product that we have now. Snellville Youth Commission plan. Christy, I don't know if anybody has talked to the group yet about an activity list. You know, I think that was the direction we wanted to give them, get their input on an activity list so we can go from here. And so maybe Chris can start working on that.
Yeah, we actually do have all of that completed. It's just a matter of additional things.
Okay. I know you're working on the big event coming up, so
Right.
we have a little time there. Commercial property, that we talked about code enforcement and annexation. Jason and his folks are ready to go. We just need the addresses for the areas we need to work on. We talked about annexation a year after SDS. Well, SDS should be done in February. We can meet that deadline. The county's getting information out. I reviewed the road map again with Gay today. So a year from adoption, and we can start planning what we do with commercial annexation. Look at some areas.
Can we
come
hold
up with
off
some
on any
numbers?
discussion until after we have agreement on the library?
Yeah, well, that's why we're waiting a year.
Okay.
There you go.
Well, and just since you said the words or the letters SDS, we did come to an agreement with the county on the last piece, which was the 911 revenue sharing. I think the city will come out fine in the way we got it negotiated. But what that's gonna, Chairman Nash is still gonna push to have everything done by February 28th or 29th, which is our deadline. So have no idea yet, but it could require a specially called meeting or two if we have some things that need to get approved. They're also gonna check with the DCA about, what if we don't quite have everything finished and everybody's adoption's done by February 29th? There's penalties that can go in place. We could lose local government status, which means the police can't use radar. There's a whole lot of penalty that goes with all of that. And we want to avoid that. But it may be a situation where if the DCA knows that everything's coming along, and it's just a little bit of timing that nothing has ever happened, so we're checking those things out, but just might need a specially called meeting or two before the end of the month.
And I can tell you, you should be very proud of our mayor. She exhibited patience and reticence and diligence in herding all the police cities into an agreement. And also, we're working with the county in Charlotte. And I think your personal relationship paid off there.
Well, thank you.
The county's final offer actually exceeded by a little bit what our final proposal to the county was. So, and I thought that phone call would take about 5 seconds, but of course, it took about 30 minutes or 40 minutes, and then we had to wait a little while on Norcross. So Barbara did a great job in seeing that through. So.
Pinching anybody's heads off.
City Special Event Coordination. We're going to work with Kelly and the Recreation Department. We have a meeting coming up next week where we're going to make sure that through teamwork, all our events are successful and we don't step on anybody's toes on the other end. Ordinance development, I just made a comment there that from the discussion, we're going to concentrate on truly needed code. We're going to follow the state actions. When whatever comes out of Atlanta, we'll have to adjust and work on that. I know there's some discussion on short-term rentals and some other stuff that hopefully they might take our lead on, but I doubt it. So that's kind of the list for this time. I'm going to add some items from the work program from what we adopted in the comp plan to these, and so we'll have a little more to look at next time.
Okay.
And just to give you an update, I think you're getting your weekly building permit reports from Jason, so that's done from the meeting. And Jason also is working on training schedules for the board members in the planning area. So,
Just comment on number 3, the city 2020 census plan.
yes.
Can we have something on our next agenda so it can be publicly put out that what we're doing and who's doing it? And even if it's just some sort of ceremonial thing,
Sure.
I think it's important.
Or
It's a
maybe
good
a
idea.
committee report or something.
Yeah.
Not
Well, I
council
don't
meeting.
want to make more work for anybody. It's just
February 24th.
many people in the community have mentioned it and brought it up, and I think it's important to let them know that we.
Brian's going to get a lot of information out on the
Well, no,
website.
Solange is on the job.
Right.
Yep. She'll
Okay.
take care of us.
So we have one more
And
item
I
here
shall.
I nominated.
to talk about, and that's the moratorium on the stickers. I had it on my calendar that it expired tonight, so that's why I'd asked to have it put on for extension, but Chuck said that it's actually March 11th.
Oh.
But if we were going to adopt something, we would need to start with first readings at the next meeting. But my thought was, it looks like the state legislature's gonna do something, or did they already?
They did, and basically all they did was they defined electric scooters under Title 40, which is the motor vehicle code, and basically.
So have at it.
Yeah, it said local, you can have at it.
Okay.
So it's back in our court.
So I was just gonna suggest, and what's on the agenda tonight, I asked Melissa, just go ahead and put it on the agenda. If anybody had a problem, we could pull it off, but at least it's on there. That we just do another 6-month extension on the moratorium, and then we can figure out
Yeah.
where we go from here.
Because the market appears to be shrinking in Atlanta. People
Yeah.
keep pulling
Yeah.
out,
Yeah.
so maybe a business model that'll
Right.
go away.
Well, and I don't know, frankly, why we need one, because you can't ride them on the sidewalks, you can't ride them on the streets.
Not many places left.
No.
Now, they did only address the electric scooters, not the electric bicycles and the other things that are being shared through those services.
Well, and if we had electric bicycles and we had bike paths, I'd say what lazy people, but
Well, it's the rental deal where they're.
Right.
Yeah.
Just leaving that alone.
All right, so sounds like we'll leave the moratorium extension on the agenda.
Sounds good.
And with that, will we need exec session?
We had things, but they can all wait until the next meeting. There isn't anything that's an urgent decision. So.
And we don't need to talk about this anymore, do we?
I
Unless
think,
you wanna make a change.
I don't wanna make a
Well,
change.
as long as Eric and Jason know what the,
That was Joe passing
Yeah,
that
just
around
talk-
for everybody to look at.
Oh, I was supposed to be passing it around? I didn't know that.
that's not yours to keep. Okay, so
Pass
we
it
will
around.
adjourn the work session at 7:25.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Favor?
That's all right.
Okay.
It's not a big deal.